Hello, and first of all, a very happy birthday to one and only William Shakespeare. 400 years after his death, William Shakespeare is not history, his living mirror, held up to every generation that dares to look into it. He wrote 37 plays, 144 sonnets, and somehow managed to write every human being who has ever lived. Shakespeare was born in 1564 in a small market town, the son of a globe maker. He had no university degree, no Nobel patrons by birth. He was, by every external measures, an ordinary man, and yet he walked into London, joined a theatre company, and within a decade became the most profound playwright in the English-speaking world. What does that tell us? It tells us that genuine doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for the right circumstances. It simply creates. Shakespeare's life is a proof that where you come from does not determine where your mind can go. Today, some voices will come together to explore why this one man from Stratford upon Avon still commands the whole world's stage. Then come and listen to everyone.
Hello everyone, I am Priyanka. According to me, Othello is Shakespeare's most piercing examination of racism, trust, and the poison of insecurity. Othello is a great general, competent, respected, and powerful, but he carries within him a wound. He is an outsider in a world that has always reminded him so. Lego doesn't create Othello's jealousy. He finds the crack that was already there and pours poison into it. Shakespeare understood something profound, that the most dangerous manipulators don't invent your fears, they amplify the ones you already carry. Othello's tragedy is the tragedy of every person who has ever let someone else's narrative replace their own self-knowledge. He has stopped trusting what he sees, what he knows, what he has lived, and trust instead the word of a man who hates him, and it costs him everything.
Sigmund Freud said that Shakespeare understood the unconscious man before psychology had a work for it. Look at Macbeth, a man who achieves everything and destroys himself from within. That is not a fairy tale. That is a psychological case study of guilt, paranoia, and the collapse of identity under moral violation. Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking is one of the earliest literary portrayal and psychological dissociation. Hamlet's indecision is not weakness. It is the paralysis of man caught between grief, duty, and moral ambiguity. Shakespeare understood that real battlefield is always inside the human mind, and no army, no sword can win a war against your own conscience.
Namaste. I am Sapna, and when I read Shakespeare, I found that he was not a philosopher in the academic sense. He never wrote a treatise, but embedded in his plays is one of the most sophisticated philosophical inquiries ever conducted. He asked, what is justice? What is identity? What is the self? In Hamlet, he gave us the question that defines existentialism 300 years before Sartre, to be or not to be. In King Lear, he dismantled the idea that power and wisdom come together. He was a moral philosopher who used drama as his laboratory, and his conclusions that human nature is contradictory, complex, and irreducible to simple good or evil remain the most honest philosophy we have. Thank you.
37 plays, 150 sonnets, two major narrative poems. This is the architecture of a universe, not just body of work. His tragedies teaches us how great people fall. His comedies teach us how fluid people survive. His histories teach us how power corrupts and how nations lose their soul. His romances, The Tempest, Winter Still, teach us that forgiveness is not weakness. It is the highest form of power a human being can exercise. Every genre Shakespeare touched, he reinvented. He didn't just write literature, he defined what literature could be.
Hi, it's Anamika here. People think Romeo and Juliet is a love story. It is. But it is also Shakespeare's most brutal critique of how love can be weaponized, idealized, and destroyed by external forces. Romeo and Juliet do not die because they love each other. They die because the world around them refused to evolve. Family pride, social hatred, political rivalry, these are the real killers. Shakespeare is making social argument that when society poisons its institutions with hatred, the most innocent, the young, the loving, the hopeful pay the price. Romeo and Juliet is not a fantasy about love. It is tragedy about the cost of collective failures. Thank you.
Friends, Shakespeare ethic is one of the most underrated lesson of his legacy. He was writing for commercial theatre. Plays had to be ready, audience had to be filled, bills had to be paid. He didn't wait for inspiration. He showed up and created. He reportedly wrote 2 plays per year on average, while also acting, managing a theatre, company, and handling business affairs. His discipline was industrial. His output was extraordinary. He teaches us that genius is not a gift that waits, it is a muscle that works. The muse does not come to the idle, she comes to the one already at the desk. King Lear is Shakespeare's most devastating meditation on power, age, love, and blindness. Lear is a king who demands love as performance. And when his youngest daughter, Cordelia, offers him only one honest silence, he banishes her. He confuses flattery with loyalty, status with wisdom, power with truth. Shakespeare is saying something radical here, that the greatest danger a powerful person faces is not external enemies. It is their own vanity. Lear goes mad, not because the world is cruel, but because reality can no longer match his self-image. The play is a warning to every leader, every parent, every person who mistakes before obeyed for being loved.
Hello, I am Pooja, and according to me, what makes Shakespeare morally perform is that he never preaches. He never tell you who the hero is and who the villain is. He make you figure it out yourself. Shylock in The Merchant of Venice and supposed to be the antagonist, but Shakespeare gave him the most ever-setting speech about human dignity ever written. If you picked us to be not breed, he forces the audience to question their own prejudice. That is ethical education of the highest order, not through instruction but through empathy. Shakespeare believed that moral growth comes from being made to feel, not from being told what is right. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Srishti. I noticed that long before Daniel Goleman wrote about emotional intelligence, Shakespeare was mapping it in every play he created. He understood that emotions are not weaknesses, they are data. Prospero in The Tempest chooses forgiveness over revenge. And Shakespeare frames this as the ultimate act of strength, not surrender. Portia in The Merchant of Venice uses empathy and wit to defeat an adversary in a court of law. Shakespeare's most powerful characters are not the ones who suppress their feelings. They are the ones who understand their feelings deeply enough to choose how to act on them. He was teaching emotional mastery 400 years before modern psychology gave it a name.
Hi, I am Sachin. As far as I think, Shakespeare didn't write just in the English language, he built up large part of it. Over 1700 words we use daily were coined or first recorded by Shakespeare, like Pedro, lonely, generous, vulnerable, Avon, cold-blooded, bedroom, swagger, jelly. He gave us the phrase, break the ice in a pickle, wild goose choose, heart of gold. He understood that language is just not a communication, it's so we think. He gave us the phrase, like break the ice in a pickle, while chew chased, heart of gold. He understood that language is just not a communication, it is how we think. When you expand language, you extend the boundaries of human thought itself. Shakespeare's greatest legacy may be this: he gave the English speaking world a vocabulary for its own interior life.
Hi, I'm Ikra. I noticed that Shakespeare's Hamlet is perhaps the most psychological complex character ever created. He is the man who knows the truth, to power to act at frozen, not by cowardice, but by the terrifying weight of moral responsibility. He questioned the ghost. He doubt on perception. He staged play with a play to verify the reality. This is not madness. This is radical intellectual honesty in the face of impossible choice. Hamlet's tragedy is that 2 billions for the world he forced to inhabit. His philosopher assigned the role of revenge. When a contradiction becomes unbearable, everything collapses. If Hamlet is every thinking person who has ever been trapped between what they know, what they must do.
Hey everyone, Shikha here. And according to me, Shakespeare's Macbeth is a masterclass in the psychology of ambition gone wrong. At the start, Macbeth is a war hero, respected, loyal, celebrated. But the moment he entertains the idea that he could be more, the moral value begins to break down. Shakespeare shows us something terrifying, that It doesn't need a monster to commit monstrous acts. It just needs an ordinary person with ordinary ambitions who makes one fateful decision to cross one moral line. And then keeps on doing so. And then cannot stop crossing more lines to protect the first one. As it is told, I am in blood steeped in so far. Macbeth is the story of every person who has ever been rationalized a moral compromise and then watched their entire character collapse from within. Thank you so much.
Why did Shakespeare endure? Not because our universities force him on us, not because the cultural nostalgia. He endures because every single thing he wrote is still happening. Leaders are still battering their people like Claudius. Children are still being sacrificed by their parents in wars like Juliet. Brilliant people are still being paralyzed by impossible choices like Hamlet. Loyal people are still being destroyed by the manipulators like Othello. And people everywhere are still choosing between ambition and conscience like Macbeth. Shakespeare endures because human nature has not changed. And until it does, until we learn to govern our own darkness, we will keep returning to this one extraordinary man who saw all of it and put it on a stage for us to see ourselves. Thank you, and once again, happy birthday to this legend.